Hi everyone, so I wanted to make this video not just as a continuation of my first one. If you haven't seen that one, I'll leave it in the description box below, but also in light of new information that's emerged over the past few days about Hagia Sophia. Following its recent reconversion into a mosque, the first public Muslim prayer in 86 years in Hagia Sophia took place on Friday 24th of July. Despite coronavirus precautions, thousands of people were in attendance, with a limit of 1,000 inside, but many outside praying. The prayers began with Erdogan reading from the Quran, and the call to prayer was heard from the 4 minarets around the monument afterwards. But let's picture this. You've got this famous church built by Christians. It's full of Byzantine icons, so Christian images, but all of a sudden it's been redefined as a fully functioning mosque. The question is, what happens to all the pictures? I want to discuss the decision to conceal the icons in the Hagia Sophia following its reconversion. This could either be seen as a sort of sacrilegious iconoclasm or inadvertent acknowledgement of the holiness of Christian imagery. I want to draw attention to this choice, and I want to indicate how it can be construed as a sort of modern echo of iconoclasm, but I'd also like to indicate how we can be reconciled to this choice positively. So firstly, what actually is iconoclasm? And secondly, how are we seeing it played out in 2020 by Erdogan? So the term iconoclasm refers to the deliberate destruction of images, statues, monuments for religious reasons. The word comes from the Greek ikon, meaning image, and klau, meaning to break. The word for the contention over images in Greek is ikonomachia, again with ikon meaning likeness, image, and machia meaning battle or fight. The word was coined from a movement that occurred in Byzantium, which spanned roughly a century. So the first movement or wave was from about 726 to 787. Then there was a break where dogma sort of swung back in favour of images. And then the second movement was from about 816 to 843. In 754, it was proclaimed that, supported by the Holy Scriptures and the Fathers, we declare unanimously, in the name of the Holy Trinity, that there shall be rejected and removed and cursed every likeness which is made out of any material and any colour, whatever by the evil art of painters. If anyone ventures to represent the divine image, charakter meaning character, of the word, after the incarnation with material colours, he is an adversary of God. If anyone shall endeavour to represent the form of the saints in lifeless pictures with material colours, which are of no value, for this notion is vain and introduced by the devil, and does not rather represent their virtues as living images in himself, he is an adversary of God. It's quite a powerful and chilling sentiment. This destruction was played out on an enormous scale in Hagia Sophia. You might have seen this picture before. This here is the Deesis mosaic, which is located in the imperial enclosure in the south gallery of the building. Deesis comes from the Greek deesis, meaning prayer or supplication, and applies to a traditional iconic representation of either Christ in majesty or Christ Pantokrator. It usually shows Christ enthroned, flanked by the Virgin Mary and St. John the Baptist. The Deesis mosaic in Hagia Sophia is a perfect example. Although we could imagine the dates of completion of the interior would correspond with the completion of the exterior, this is not the case. So this mosaic was completed in 1261, and this is in our late Byzantine period. If you've seen this mosaic before, you might have wondered why over half of it is missing or not filled in. You may have thought it was never completed, or you might have actually reasoned that it's due to damage over time. After all, it is a very old mosaic. But the real reason is not so innocent. It was willfully covered up. The damage of the image as we see it today is mostly due to being smothered with plaster, probably in the 16th century. Even though Turks originally preserved the frescoes and mosaics of Christian images on the walls when Hagia Sophia was reconverted into a mosque, the Islamic code did forbid figural representation, and so the mosaics and frescoes were eventually painted over. As you can see, it didn't survive well. Only about a third of it is left, but luckily we get to see the faces of the figures. In 1993, the Byzantine Institute of America actually discovered the Deus mosaic beneath layers of plaster. It took a year to remove the plaster and many more months to restore and conserve it. So as they've now reconverted Hagia Sophia into a mosque, there's obviously a question of what would happen with the existing Christian mosaics in the building. As the building's function is no longer secular, it inevitably means that the significance of the mosaics and icons inside has to change too. People who come there to pray can no longer really be impartial to what's in front of them. I was wondering about this when it was first announced, and I thought I should just wait until the day of the first prayer, which was a couple of days ago, just to see what would happen. Days before the first prayer, the Turkish presidential spokesperson Ibrahim Kalin announced that mosaics depicting Christian figures would be covered with curtains or even lasers when the first prayers are held on Friday. My initial thoughts were, okay, curtains, that would make sense. Historically, ecclesiastical curtains have had a very important relationship with both covering and concealing of religious imagery to guard their sacred properties. In an interview with broadcaster NTV, Kalin said that some mosaics of Mary and Gabriel that are positioned in the direction of the Qibla, where Muslims face during prayer, would be covered with curtains. He said other mosaics of Jesus and other Christian figures did not pose an obstacle for Muslim prayers because they're not located in the direction of Qibla. But he didn't say whether they would remain uncovered at all times. Greek City Times actually published that icons and mosaics will be covered with special technology and lighting. Specifically, special curtains will be used during Islamic prayer, while carpets will be placed on the floor, which will be kind of illuminated to darken the space and not show paintings. As far as I can see from the images that have just emerged, they're using a kind of white drapery that lightly hangs from the ceiling, just to prevent contact with the vision of the icon. So is this an example of modern iconoclasm? Or can we take a more liberal view of it, that it's actually sympathetic to Christian liturgy? Well, in the church, the curtain has the role of dividing, in that it separates something godly from a potentially defiled humanity, and only the high priest is entitled to pass beyond the veil into a sacred space. Holiness is concerned with separations, for reserving a sacred zone from a secular ambience, hence the obsession in the Old Testament with the clean, mundus. One of the Greek words for holy place is sanctuary, themenos, which tellingly means cut off or set apart. The motif of creating a sacred precinct is miniaturized in the institution of the curtain. The significance of the curtain from archaic times was not forgotten in the early church, as is demonstrated by Paul's description in Hebrews. After the second curtain or drape, he says, assuming that there is a first curtain, that there's a further tent-like construction, this is known as the skini, called the Holy of Holies, Hagia Agion. The term for drape or spread that is sometimes translated as curtain or veil derives from the verb to spread out over, and this is from the verb to spread. The spread or drape has been identified as the inner veil as opposed to the outer veil, which was used of a dark hood or veil of mourning since Homeric times. As the origin of our word scene, the term for this further curtain, skini, is tantalizingly obscure, referring to something between a stage and a tent or tabernacle. It's commonly translated in the New Testament as tabernacle, that is a kind of tent or baldacchino, baldachin, but the word also has somewhat metaphorical applications, as with the tabernacle of witness. In all events, there are multiple curtains that go to its construction, each one staging a further revelation, finally yielding to the supremely sacred, the Holy of Holies. And the cortina motif was utilized as a form of ceremonial concealment by late antique and Byzantine rulers. With this in mind, I want to suggest that the decision by the Islamic authorities to use curtains could even be seen as protecting Christian piety. Although the curtain is being used to cover, This means at some point it has to be opened, so someone has to unveil it and see what lies beneath. And as human beings, we're always more curious about things that we can't see, so things that lie beneath the surface. What is not privy to the human eye upon first glance invites questions, curiosity, imagination, for behind the cloth lies a hidden temptation. Representation, after all, can also boil down to a question of power, so who gets to represent what? In excluding the Christian image, the Turkish Muslims paradoxically use a curtain, so a motif that sacralizes what's behind it. So if you are offended in some way that the Turks are banishing sacred images in your tradition, you can be consoled that in a way those same images behind the curtain, or even lasers, are effectively enhanced in their holiness by the same principles by which curtains always preserved the sacred. I personally would argue that yes, what we're seeing is a form of iconoclasm, but it's latent and not harmful. Sure, it's an act of banishing holy imagery that means a lot to Christians, especially Orthodox Christians, but it's doing so in a way that's quiet and discreet rather than physical and destructive. And paradoxically, we could see this action as actually revealing how special and sacred these icons truly are, maybe enhancing the holiness of the image, treating it as the Holy of Holies behind a curtain. I hope this perspective has helped to understand that the choice to cover the icons in Hagia Sophia is only the latest twist for a building that has long dealt with the contested places of images inside it. Thank you so much for watching.